This little car was Hitler's dream car. Well, not exactly this one, but the idea behind this car. We all know and love German cars. They are some of the best there is. And this is proven by facts and science. Just look at Le Mans. Porsche and Audi have dominated there for years. And look at F1 with Mercedes with their 8 consecutive championship titles. But what if I told you that some of the most iconic names in automotive history were the mechanic backbone of the Nazi regime? All these companies were like this with the Nazi regime. Some of them even with the big man himself. Hitler was such a big fan of Ferdinand Porsche that he gave him an honorary title as an SS Oberführer. Yes, our beloved brands were not always on their best behavior. In this video we are digging into the dark past of German car brands. What were they doing before the Second World War? What were their biggest contribution during the war? And what happened to them after the war? And we'll find out how Hitler invented the Beetle.
Dictators need symbols to represent their power. In the old days, kings sat on thrones, and for Hitler, it was his car.
Disclaimer. This is a very complicated and somewhat sensitive topic. In this video, I will address what I personally find interesting. If you want to learn more, I'll add some links in the description. And if you're too lazy for that, ask ChatGPT for more info. Let's start with Mercedes. Adolf Hitler was known for many things. Let's phrase that differently. Adolf Hitler was a petrolhead. That's a fact. And he was also vegan, so you anti-car people don't use this as some dirty argument. He loved cars, even though he didn't have a driver's license. He preferred to be chauffeured around, which maybe explains his favorite car, Mercedes. It was by far his favorite car. He had a whole fleet of Mercs, not only because he liked to sit in them. You see, to Hitler, the automotive industry, just like today, was a centerpiece of German pride. Already in the 1930s, Mercedes was world-renowned for making the best luxury vehicles. And not only that, also, like today, they were famous for being the best on the racetrack. Honestly, which is not a big surprise because Carl Benz, well, he invented the car. So it was this deep-rooted German history and engineering superiority which made Mercedes the perfect propaganda Nazi car. For example, Mercedes was gladly invited to NS festivities, where they could use the platform to advertise their cars. Hitler also supported Mercedes' racing efforts financially. He gave Mercedes 500,000 Reichsmark, and he also gave Audi 300,000 Reichsmark, more on that later. One of the most memorable cars Mercedes built at that time was the W31 G4, which was some sort of 6-wheeled off-road Nazi upper-class car. Kinda looks familiar, doesn't it? Well, at least Mercedes is sticking to its heritage. The W31 G4 was nearly 6 meters long, weighed 3.7 tons and was powered by an inline 8-cylinder engine, which sent power to 4 back wheels. That's called a 6x4. But Hitler's personal car was the Mercedes 770. It was every fascist's favorite car. Goering drove it, Himmler drove it, Mussolini drove it, and the Pope. And if you want it, and I do mean it, Hitler's car still exists. It is somewhere in America of all places, fully restored, and you can have it for about $7 million. So if you want it, be quick, because Kanye probably already has it in his shopping cart. During the war, Mercedes mainly built aircraft engines and trucks and didn't focus on cars anymore. But in 1937 they did build one memorable car, the Mercedes T80. With it they wanted to beat the record for the world's fastest car, and they had help from Ferdinand Porsche. This name you will see in nearly every car brand. He was like the guy if you had an engineering problem. And they tried to beat the world record by putting in a Mercedes-built 44.5 liter V12 producing 3,000 horsepower, taken from a Messerschmitt. They hoped to reach around 700 kilometers per hour, but because of the war, well, this never happened. Audi. Audi wasn't Audi as we know it today. Back then, Audi was just a part of a larger merger called Auto Union, with 3 other car brands: Horch, DKW, and Wanderer. They all got together so they had a chance against Mercedes, which was back then already a huge company. And each of those companies, Audi, DKW and Wanderer, was represented by one ring. Hence the 4-ring logo from Auto Union we know today, or from Audi. Before the war, Audi was most famous for its race cars, and they had a fierce rivalry with Mercedes. Remember when I said Hitler gave 500,000 Reichsmark to Mercedes for their F1 project? Well, he also gave 300,000 to Audi, and he hoped to fuel the competition so they would get in some kind of development war and try to outdevelop each other, so Germany would be the most dominant country in F1. And for Hitler this was pure propaganda. By showing the world they have the greatest F1 cars, he proves Germany has the best cars overall, and so underlining Germany's engineering dominance. He managed to issue this development war between the two competitors. Mercedes was known for their brute force with powerful engines, while Audi was known for clever engineering like mid-engine cars. For example, the Mercedes-Benz W125 from 1937 had a supercharged 5.6 liter inline engine producing nearly 600 horsepower, and it could reach the speeds up to 320 kilometers an hour, which is also insane by modern standards. Meanwhile, Audi or Auto Union stunned the racing world with the Type C Grand Prix racer, which featured a mid-mounted 6-liter V16 engine producing 520 horsepower and a top speed of over 300 kilometers an hour. These cars weren't just fast, they were terrifying, and they helped laying the groundwork for what eventually would become F1. And when they weren't fighting on the F1 track, they were fighting on the Autobahn. They were obsessed of building the fastest car in the world. So they would build those huge monsters which would go up to 400 kilometers an hour. For this they built cars with over 700 horsepower. And Audi even came up with the first iteration of ground effect cars like today's F1 cars. There is a reason why this era of racing is called the golden era of Grand Prix. And if you want to learn a little bit more about it, I put a link in the description which discusses those race cars built in Nazi Germany. During the war, Audi just built trucks for the army, which wasn't that interesting. But the brand which was integral to Nazi Germany was Porsche and VW. Porsche and VW came from the same person, from Ferdinand Porsche. He wasn't an owner of a car brand. Porsche didn't exist as it does today. It was an engineering and design firm. For example, he built Audi's first rear engine F1 car, which was faster than the one of Mercedes, even though Audi had the smaller budget, which proves some of his genius. And with the rise of Nazi Germany, Porsche and Hitler found in each other a perfect ally. And together they dreamed up the Volkswagen, which means the people's car. It was Hitler's pet project. His dream was to design a cheap car which everybody in Germany could afford. And Ferdinand Porsche then designed the Nazi-backed KdF-Wagen, which stood for Kraft durch Freude, which is a Nazi slogan meaning strength through joy. And today we know it as the Beetle. Hitler was deeply involved in the development, visiting the VW factory regularly and participating in meetings. And just as a side note, also always involved was Ferry Porsche, Ferdinand Porsche's son. But more about him later, because until the end of World War II it was Ferdinand who was the shining Nazi star. Even though father and son both were in the Nazi party, Ferdinand shared with Hitler the passion for big German war machines. For example, it was Ferdinand who helped design the feared Tiger tank. It was one of the most, if not the most successful battle tank, with a kill ratio depending on sources of 5:1 to 10:1 against other tanks. But they were very expensive to build and tended to be very unreliable. In typical German fashion, it was over-engineered. Some of them had to be repaired even before they reached the battlefront. The KdF, meanwhile, was never produced. Plans were halted because of the war. But its platform was used to build the Kübelwagen, of which 50,000 units were made, and which would become also a future classic car. But as we all know, this was not the end of Hitler's little car. More on that later. BMW. When talking about BMW Nazis, you cannot get around the family Quandt. They were a rich family owning multiple businesses and 30% of BMW. And for a privately owned company, they were very close to the Nazi party. Probably a little bit closer than any other. They were like married to Joseph Goebbels, kinda close. Anyway, back then BMW was famous for building its motorcycles, you know, the ones you see in Indiana Jones. But their main revenue, 80% of it, came from making airplane engines, which meant they were an important partner for the Luftwaffe. They also had some cars, but that was still a small business. So during the war they continued building their engines, and by the end of the war they were building the 003 turbojet. But that was in 1945, and in the end the Russians took it for themselves. The end of World War II. After Germany surrendered in 1945, none of the owners of the German car brands were arrested or punished, even though all of them were part of the Nazi party, and all of them used forced labor from concentration camps and POWs. VW and BMW and Auto Union even had their own concentration camps. 150,000 forced laborers worked in these factories, producing war machines, weapons and ammunition. And thousands of them died there. 4,000 at Auto Union alone. So why were all those industry tycoons spared? Well, because the Allies had other plans. What was more important to them was that production could begin. The Allies conquered Germany and did something amazing. They didn't punish Germany. With the Marshall Plan, they wanted to rebuild Germany. And simply said, they did. Germany then became Europe's biggest economy, despite losing 2 horrendous wars in less than a generation. Because the Allies knew it's better to create a new ally than a future enemy. So what happened to those car brands? Let's start with Mercedes. Mercedes struggled at first because some of their plants were bombed. But since the brand was already well known, it was already the biggest car brand before the World War, it wasn't a problem for them to find new investors. And it took them less than 10 years to come up with the iconic 300 SL, Audi rebuilt. For Audi it was a bit harder. Auto Union fell into Soviet hands and was liquidated. But in 1949 some ex-Auto Union personnel who fled from the Russians opened a new company called Auto Union. They then produced cheap utility vehicles. It took until 1958 to see the Audi name again when Mercedes bought Auto Union. They then produced cars under the name Audi. Then in 1964 VW bought Audi, creating the brand we know today, VW Rebuilt. It took a while until VW could buy Audi, and the reason they could was Hitler's dream car. Volkswagen started again under British control. An officer decided to rebuild the brand to create jobs and transport for the occupying forces. And the British loved it so much they ordered 20,000 of them. In 1949 they gave it back to the Germans, who then started selling it all over the world. In the 1960s the VW Beetle was the best-selling car in the world, making Hitler's dream of a cheap car for the masses come true. And hilariously, it even became a symbol of peace. I don't know how they did it, but they must have had the Don Draper guy behind it. Porsche. I have to correct myself from before. Some did get punished. Ferdinand Porsche and his son Ferry Porsche were both imprisoned in France. Ferdinand was there for 2 years and his son Ferry was released a little bit earlier. Ferry then started working in Austria on the 356, creating the modern Porsche sports car brand we know today, which he built with spare VW Beetle parts. And this glorified Beetle started winning races by 1950. But it took Porsche more than 40 years until 1993 to become the big, profitable company. BMW rebuilt. BMW was banned from building cars because with their airplane engines, they were mainly an arms manufacturer. They survived until 1952 by making pots and pans. It was in 1952 that the Quandt family invested in the car brand. Remember the Goebbels lovers? Well, this family kind of took over a couple of companies and at some point became the richest family in Germany. Anyway, their first attempt to make a car was the beautiful 507, which was so expensive that they nearly went bankrupt. So they had to survive making this piece of crap. But in post-war Germany it was ideal. Conclusion. Well, what should I say? They were all guilty. But it's not like we stopped driving German cars. By now, they all acknowledge most of their war crimes, while still making a profit. Hell. Tran. They make amazing cars. Session, what did you like most about this period of German car brands? Leave it in the comments, leave a like, subscribe, and probably, is it here? Wait, no, here, watch more of those videos. Bye bye.